Guys, let's talk about the 3 things you should know when you go to a shoot. Number 1 is you should be looking out for your light. That is the number 1 thing when it comes to photography, light. So as a photographer, you have to enter the situation, whether you're at the park with your customers, whether you're at a venue with your bride and groom, whether you're doing a photo shoot at the studio. It doesn't matter what you guys are gonna do. It all begins with light. So you must assess the situation. First, look for the light. What type of light are you working with? Are you working with sunlight? Are you working outside? Are you working with sunlight? Are you working inside but with natural lights coming from windows? Are you working with artificial lights like flashes or video lights? That's the number 1 thing you have to ask yourself as you get out there before you shoot. Light. So you must assess the light. Are you doing something in the ambient lighting? Is your equipment good enough lenses that you can do a lot of ambient light stuff? Is your camera good enough to handle a lot of high ISOs? Is your camera good enough to handle ambient light situations? Is the ambient light enough? Is your equipment good enough to catch that ambient light? So that's the number 1 thing. You must determine what type of lighting you are dealing with, also where the lighting is coming from. So that way you can know how you're gonna go ahead and use your lighting in your photography. Is it nighttime? Are we outside? Are we just dealing with ambient lights? Are we dealing with a spotlight, a street light that comes? Are we going to use that as a key light, one of our street light, or are we going to use that as a backlight? Or are we outside? Are we using the sun as a backlight? Are we using the sun as a key light? So again, you must know what type of lighting you guys are dealing with, then figure out how you're going to handle it from there. So whenever I do events like weddings and quinceañeros, or I do portraits at parks or indoor at our studio, the number 1 thing is I have to know what type of light we are dealing with, and then I have to adjust accordingly, and I have to adjust fast and figure out how are we gonna do the portrait. Are we gonna add flash strobes, or how is it gonna get done? Are we just gonna bump the ISO? That's the number 1 thing you need to know when you go to a shoot is the light. What light source, what are you working with? What type of light do you have or don't you have? Number 2, now we need to figure out the background we want to use. So based on our lighting, we may have to move around and have maybe a different background that maybe we didn't want to have because of the lighting source, the way it is. We might not be able to use the background as we want it, so we may have to move our subject around a little bit. But again, look at the background and see what you're dealing with in a background. If you're doing portraits of people that have darker hair, like black hair or dark brown hair, make sure that there's nothing dark, brown or black in the back of them that may look like it's blending into their hair. So you want to look out for that when you're looking at your background. If there's no way possible to move your subject around, or that is the way based on lighting and based on the composition you want to take the photo, then make sure that you open up the aperture, maybe at 2.8 or maybe 2.0, 1.8 to go ahead and blur out that background. So that way it doesn't look like your subject is blended into the background. Now you know about your lighting. Now you need to be mindful about your background. You need to figure out, you need to assess the situation. What do you want to show and what don't you want to show? What story do you want to tell in this picture? Are you at a park? Do you want to show these beautiful trees that are being backlit by the sun? Then you need to adjust for that. Are you in a photo studio and do you have a props? Do you have a vintage chair that you're trying to show in the background? Is there a teddy bear in the background that you want to show next to your baby? Keep that in mind. Keep in mind, what are you trying to tell? What type of story are you trying to tell? Because that's what your background will do. Your background will tell a story. If you happen to use just a seamless backdrop, or if you happen to use just a white backdrop or a white wall, are you trying to tell a story, or are you just trying to go for a clean look like what I'm going for here? Keep that in mind, guys. And number 3, your subject. Your subject, your model, that is number 3. Now you've identified your light. Now you've identified the background you want to use. Now you have to key on your subject. What are you trying to do with your subject? Are you trying to have someone sit in a chair? Or you want to have them fill the whole frame of the shot? Do you want to put them in the rule of third, a little bit off to the side? Do you want to show 3/4 body? Do you want to show a close-up? Do you want to show a full body? So now what are you trying to do with your subject? What type of photos are you taking? Are you taking modeling photos? Then you have to go for some modeling poses. Are you photographing babies? Or are you photographing a bride and groom? See what I'm saying? It's all different, guys. The basics are the same. We're all in different situations, and now you got to figure out what you're going to do with your subject. What are you going to do with that photo? And that depends what type of photos they are. How are you going to pose your subject, or what type of shots do you want to frame with your subject? Are you going to make them walk towards the camera? And once you keep in mind what you're going to do with that subject, now you have those 3 things that you can put together. Now you know about your lighting and where that's coming from or not coming from. Now you know about your background. And now you're mindful of what you are going to show or what you're not going to show. And number 3 is your subject. Who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a baby? Are you dealing with a bride and groom? What are you going to do with your shot with that subject? So I hope that helps you to be a little more confident now when you go to a photo shoot on what you should be looking out for. And I hope that you guys please consider subscribing to this channel so we can go ahead and keep making amazing content for you guys. Have an awesome day shooting, y'all.